Grab your drinks and have a seat. It's time for serial killers.
Well, it's that time again. Time for us to talk into your ears.
About
serial killers
and
coffee
and
or whatever
I-
we're drinking.
yeah, and I'm T.
And I'm T.
I'm T. I'm T.
Oh, and I'm J.
And we be here to tell you all the things we know about serial killers each week.
Yes, ma'am. And this is a late night recording because we went out to a drag queen bingo night.
We did. We didn't know it was a drag queen bingo night.
Nope.
But we did like one of the plus sides to having all adults in your family. We can go to like bars and do trivia nights. We do bingo nights, and there's a bar in our area that does bingo like once a month or whatever. And it just said it was neon bingo, so we showed up, and it was actually neon drag queen bingo, but it was a good time. We all had a really good time.
No,
So
she did a really good job of bingo and entertaining the crowd, and it definitely was a different vibe. Was pretty cool.
yeah, it was a good time. And now we're here. We're going to be doing this, which is not as good of a time. I mean, it's a good time to talk about it, but it's not going to be a good time.
But what I'll do, instead of talking about what we're drinking currently right now, I'll tell you what I drank at the bar,
Okay.
which would be a kiwi strawberry cider. So I guess as I get in my older age, I like ciders.
I think they're gross. I don't like them.
Yeah, you think a lot of things are gross.
No, I'm just saying, like, I'm not a cider fan. I'm not a beer fan. I'm not a wine fan. I don't like any of that. I'm pretty much just a vodka tonic fan.
Like
all
to
I
have
drink.
your vodka tonic with your cigar.
I mean, no, that's gin and tonic anyways. But I pretty much drink vodka tonics, and every once in a while I might drink like a mojito, but that's about where I'm at. I don't really,
Yeah,
care
we tried to grow mint for our mojitos we'd make at home, and we found out real quick if you don't plant your mint in a pot, it will take over your garden. So if you decide to do mint, make sure you do it in a pot.
Yes. Okay, so is there anything else that we need to address, talk about, whatever, before we get into this episode?
I don't think so, but I did forget to turn on our Mickey neon lights in our podcasting room to make it lighthearted, so hopefully this one isn't too bad.
Yeah, well, actually, this one is not the worst of the. I mean, they're all bad.
Yeah,
they're
they all
serial
suck.
killers. This is not a gruesome one. This is not any real crazy shit. So this is actually, if you want to just say this is a lighthearted one, sure, we could go with that. So
It's on the lighter side of dark.
the lighter side of death.
Let's call that, yeah. All right, well then let's get into it.
All right, so we are talking about a man named Charles Cullen. Charles had 29 to 45 victims. The murder dates are 1984 to 2003. His location was New Jersey and Pennsylvania of the United States of America. His method of murder was medication poisoning. And then the characteristic of this is his murders were those of patients that were in a hospital that he was a nurse at.
The nurse
So it's
version of Dr. Death.
Yeah, the nurse version of Doctor. What's crazy is when I was first telling our son about this, he literally looked at me and goes, "Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about." And I go, "Oh, you do?" And he goes, "Yeah, what do they call him? Dr. Death?" And I was like, "No,
No, that
this
guy was
is
a doctor.
different person." Now, there was a nickname for him, which was Angel of Death or some shit, which I'm like, no.
No.
You're not. But you'll get why. You'll get why they say that. So a little bit of background on Charles Cullen. He was born February 22nd, 1960 in West Orange, New Jersey. He was born to Edmund and Florence, and he was the youngest of 8 children. He was raised in a working class family. They were Catholic. His father was a bus driver, doing the thing. Well, his father dies when he's 7 months old, and this actually ends up leaving Charles and the rest of his family with just his mother trying to raise them. Now, Charles claims, as an adult, he claims that he had a miserable childhood, and this was because he was bullied by his classmates along with his sister's boyfriends. So he was like, my childhood sucked because I was bullied. So there's that. Now, at the age of 9, Charles actually attempts to commit suicide by drinking chemicals from a chemistry set at the age of 9. So clearly he had some issues.
Like, did he know what he was doing?
Yes, he was trying to
or
kill
was he
himself.
just like, oh, let me taste this?
No, he was trying to kill himself.
Because, like, I remember when I was younger, there was a Crossfire game that me and my brother played with, like, these marble things, and I got tired of him winning, so I swallowed them all.
My brother and I used to play Crossfire.
Yeah. I was tired of my brother winning, so I picked up a handful, and I said, now how you going to win? No,
Did
I
you?
hope so, or they're still in my stomach.
Never.
But yeah.
You never saw them come out of your poop?
I mean, that was a long time. I don't remember my
Oh
feces
my
from,
God. First of all,
40 years
who says
ago.
feces, like for reals.
My poop.
Anyways, I remember that game. My brother and I played Crossfire, actually, and I definitely never did that. So, no, it wasn't that. He literally was trying to kill himself. In 1977, so again, he was born in 1960, so he's 17 years old, maybe 18, turning 18. His mother is killed in a car accident. And at this point, he ends up finishing school, and then he enlists in the Navy. So he just kind of keeps going with life, even though his mother has now died and he has no father, and he's the youngest of 8 children. So he's the last one. Now, he actually was the rank of a petty officer, 3rd class, and he served aboard the submarine USS Woodrow Wilson.
So he was a seaman.
Yes, he was in the Navy. Now, there comes a point, though, where he starts to show signs of having some mental instabilities, and he actually ends up being transferred to a supply ship known as the USS Canopus because of this, because of his mental instabilities. Now, over the next few years, he actually attempts to commit suicide 7 times over like a 2 to 3 year period.
That's a lot.
It is a fucking lot. Now, he does end up being medically discharged from the Navy in 1984 due to some obvious mental health issues.
So I just got to throw this out there because it's on my mind as you say that. If he tried to commit suicide that many times, like I just, in my mind, I'm like, well, if you failed that many times, were you really trying to kill yourself, or was it more a cry for attention?
You know, it was not a cry for attention. I think he definitely has some serious mental health issues. We get into one of the suicides, but I'm assuming that he tried, based off of one of the times that he committed suicide, I don't think he thought it through. Like, I don't think he was like
a spur of the moment. Like,
yeah,
oh,
I think
I'm
he
gonna
would
do
go
this.
through this bout where it's like, I just can't fucking deal with this anymore. And he would do something that would have taken his life, but maybe, so like if he were to try to hang himself, well, if somebody goes into his bunk room and he's trying to hang himself, they're going to see him, right? So it's almost like he would do things that, yes, could probably have killed him, but every time something stopped it. Somebody intervened, somebody found out. And really, on a ship, on the Navy ships, they're like all over each other in those especially in the submarines. They don't have a lot of fucking space. So I don't really think he was ever by himself long enough to actually commit suicide.
And the ship you said was the USS
Canopus?
Canopus?
I don't know if that's how you actually
Well,
say it.
I thought about like you could start a cruise line like the USS Cannabis.
I know. When I first read it, I was like, that's an
I
interesting
was like,
one.
that could be an interesting cruise line.
In 1987, he actually ends up, because again, he was medically discharged from the Navy in 1984. So he decides at that point he wants to be a nurse because that's just something he wanted to do. So he enrolls in school. And in 1987, he graduates with his nursing degree, and he actually gets a job in a burn unit at St. Barnabas Medical Center in Livingston. Now, he also meets a woman named Adrienne Baum, and they actually get married in 1987 as well. And they actually have a daughter later that same year. And they do end up having another daughter. So he has 2
So
daughters.
it seems like life is going good.
Right.
You're progressing.
Right.
You're creating a family, a career.
So now 1993, Adrian actually files a restraining order against Charles with the fear that he would endanger her or her children. She had actually noted in her restraining order that she had witnessed Charles having unusual behavior towards their dogs, like trying to drown them or like weird things that he was doing to these dogs, stuffing them in the garbage can and just leaving them there in the house, not like suffocating them, but just like putting them in there and then not letting them out. And so she claims that. She also had claimed that Charles had spiked people's drinks with lighter fluid at one point. He had also burned his daughter's books. And she also claimed that he had left his daughters with a babysitter for a week, which of course Charles denies all of these allegations, but she's putting out a restraining order and she doesn't want him around her or her daughters. And then in 1994, they actually get divorced. So this was like the beginnings of her wanting to divorce him, obviously. Now, on June 11th, 1988, Charles ends up giving a lethal overdose of medication to one of his patients in St. Barnabas. Okay, so really quick, I'm going to tell you this. I do not have a list of the names. Most of these patients don't even have names. They do have names, but I mean, there are so many patients that I was like, I'm not going to go through each person and all that stuff. I'm just going to go through specific incidences and then we'll go from there. Now, he does later admit that he actually had killed several patients at St. Barnabas, but they obviously didn't know in the moment that he was killing these patients. Now, this included an AIDS patient that he had killed by giving an overdose of insulin. Now, he ends up leaving this medical center in January of 1992. And again, he started in 1988. The hospital had actually started looking into the contamination of IV bags at St. Barnabas that had led to dozens of patients' deaths. And so they started to investigate, like, why would these IV bags be killing patients? So they start investigating. Well, around that same time, he decides he's going to leave. So he leaves St. Barnabas.
They stopped shortly after.
They did. What's really funny is there's a movie and a documentary, actually. I watched both of them. There's a movie and a documentary. And in the movie, one of the girls, like the main character, that's a woman, she reaches out to one of her old classmates from nursing school who happened to work at the hospital with him. And she had said something about, there were rumors that he was killing patients or something. And she was like, well, what makes you think that? And she was like, well, all of these patients died and then he left and no patients, like nobody has coded since then. And we think he was doing it through the IV bag. So I'm assuming that's what they're referencing, is that he was at this hospital and what they said he was doing was putting punctures into IV bags and putting insulin or other kinds of clear medications into these IV bags. And then the nurses would just go grab an IV bag and they'd put it to a patient.
They'd be like, oh, need to grab a saline IV bag.
Right.
Do.
And inside of it is something that killed the person. Now, in February of 1992, he actually gets a job at Warren Hospital in Phillipsburg. And he actually kills 3 elderly women in that hospital. And all of them were autopsied, and it was found that they had all died of an overdose of digoxin, which is a heart medication. Now, one of his victims actually said to somebody in the hospital as she's fucking dying, that sneaky male nurse had injected her with something while she was sleeping. Okay. And then nobody fucking listened to her and nobody believed her. And they're just like, okay, you fucking crazy. And they just,
yeah. And I'm sure after all this came out, the people who were like,
oh yeah,
you're crazy, were like, oh shit.
They're like, damn.
Oops.
So then in March of 1993, Charles actually breaks into the home of one of his female coworkers' houses. Now he was kind of like stalking her. And so he breaks in and she lives in this home with her son, her little son. Now he does leave the house without disturbing anybody. He doesn't wake anybody up. He doesn't take anything, but he does breaks in and leaves. She realizes that he breaks in, calls the cops. She presses charges. stalking charges. A police report is filed against him, and he does actually plead guilty to trespassing and was sentenced to a fucking year probation.
See, and this is why
this
we
is
have
the
cameras
shit that
in our
pisses
house.
me the fuck off. Like, you literally are stalking somebody, so let's put you on probation? Give me a fucking break. Now, at this point, after this happens, he attempts suicide again. And he also ends up taking 2 months off of work because after attempting to commit suicide, he's actually put in to a psychiatric treatment facility, and he takes 2 months off of work to be at this psychiatric facility. So again, somehow, some way, somebody found out he attempted suicide and he was put into a psychiatric facility. That's what I mean. It's not that I don't think he was doing it for attention. I think he was just not very good at it, I guess you could say. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's why I was asking earlier. Like, part of me thinks like he was trying it, but not fully trying it.
Oh,
like,
no,
I don't
he
know.
was fully trying it. He would do stuff that was obvious to people that something wasn't right, and they would like call the cop. You'll see. I go into detail of one of his attempted suicides. So a 91-year-old cancer patient actually ends up reporting Charles, by the way, who was not his nurse. Okay, or her nurse, sorry. This 91-year-old cancer patient woman makes a report that this male nurse, i.e. Charles, came into her room and injected her with something. So she makes a report to the hospital and says, this male nurse came in. He gave me a shot of some sort and then just left. He's not my nurse. I've never seen him before. And they're like, yeah, okay. Well, she dies the next day. So there's that. Now, he does attempt to commit suicide 2 more times after that, and he does quit Warren Hospital by the end of 1993. So he's killed all these people in Warren Hospital, attempting suicide multiple times while he's there, going into psychiatric facilities, all the things. Then Charles goes on to work in the intensive care / cardiac unit at Hunterdon Medical Center in Flemington. Between January and September of 1994, he actually ends up killing 5 patients with digoxin overdoses. Again, the heart medication. And he leaves Hunterdon and goes to Morristown Memorial Hospital. Now, he is fired from Morristown Memorial Hospital because the hospital has chalked him up as having a poor performance record, and so they actually fire him. Then in February of 1998, he starts working at Liberty Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Now there, he is accused of giving medication at unscheduled times and is fired from his job after he was seen going into a patient's room with syringes. Now, it led to an altercation in that room, and the patient ended up having a broken arm because of this altercation. So he was fired because it was like, first of all, that's not your patient.
Yeah, and why'd you break
Second
their
of all,
arm?
why did you break his arm? And third of all, why the fuck were you going in there with a fucking bunch of syringes? Like, this doesn't make sense. And
Well,
also,
we all know why.
And also, you're giving patients medication when they're not even scheduled to be having medication. So they fire him. Charles goes on. Oh, no, sorry. During his time at this facility, he did claim to kill at least 1 patient. Now, Charles then goes on to work at Easton Hospital in Pennsylvania. On December 30th, 1998, Charles kills a patient with a digoxin overdose. Now, there was an internal investigation into this death because it was very fucking strange because this person was not dying. This person was on the mend to actually be discharged, and all of a sudden the person dies. So they look at the blood work of this patient and realize that they had a bunch of digoxin in their system, and that just didn't make sense. Now, he was not linked to this patient in any way. He had not dealt with the patient, really nothing. And so they announced it too, like, we're going to do an internal investigation because somebody fucked up. Now, of course, at the time, they're not looking at like, oh, we got a murderer.
Yeah, they're looking outside of the people who were working on that
and they're
person.
not looking for murder. They're probably looking for, oh, fuck, somebody did something. They injected the wrong medication, or it was a miscommunication or whatever. So they're not thinking somebody's walking around murdering people in this hospital. But he is not linked to it anyway, so nothing happens. Then he begins working in the burn unit at Lehigh Valley Valley Hospital in March of 1999, and he kills 1 patient and attempts to kill another. And at that hospital, he actually ends up resigning from that hospital, to which then he ends up getting a job at St. Luke's Hospital in the cardiac unit. And over a period of years, he actually killed at least 5 more patients. He attempted to kill 2 more as well. Then on January 11th, 2000, Charles tries to commit suicide again. Now this time, this is the kind of suicide he was committing. He lit a charcoal grill in his bathtub while he was in there with the hopes that he would die from carbon monoxide poisoning. First of all, that would take probably some time, right? You light this charcoal grill, you're going to fill this bathroom with carbon monoxide, you're going to die. However, you're in an apartment building. So like the minute that, people start seeing or smelling weird things or seeing smoke, they're going to call the fucking fire department. So,
or how about you just take some of the shots you're fucking giving everybody else and give it to yourself?
Well, because it's probably painful. My guess is it's probably painful for him. For people, it probably wasn't like a. I will say that on the documentary, one of the women did say that one of the drugs that he had injected in some of these patients was a paralytic, so it paralyzed them. And it would paralyze them to the point where they could not breathe on their own. So they literally would be paralyzed, completely fully aware of what was going on as they sat there and couldn't breathe.
Just suffocated without moving or being able to tell anybody.
You can't do anything. But your brain is very well, you're paralyzed, but you're very well aware of your surroundings. But you can't ask for help, nothing. So you literally are like suffocating and drowning within your own body. So that is some of the shit that he did to these people. So
That's
why would he
torture.
do that to himself? Like, he obviously would not do that to himself. So anyways, his neighbors actually smell smoke and they're like, something's not right. That smoke smells like it's coming from our neighbor's home. And so they actually call the fire department, to which the fire department goes in, obviously. And he was taken to a psychiatric hospital because that's kind of strange to have somebody, in their bathroom trying to, light a barbecue.
He's like, look, it was cold outside. I was hungry.
Well, they bring him to a psychiatric facility and they release him the next day. So obviously they didn't think there was something wrong with him, which bullshit. Now, Charles became a suspect in the patient deaths at St. Luke's Hospital because vials of medications were found in disposal bins, and an investigation had actually showed that Charles had taken the medication. Now, through the movie and through the documentary, I found that they had a specific system where it locks, like all of the medication is locked. And what you had to do, you had to go in, you had to type in what patient you were getting it for, what medication you were getting, and then who you were. And then this drawer opens and you can grab the medication and then you shut the door. However, there was a glitch in the system that if you hit cancel after the drawer plopped up, or if you hit cancel, the drawer would still open, but it would pretend like you didn't actually take anything out. That's what he was doing. So he would go in, log a patient's name or number or whatever, pick up whatever medication he was getting, digoxin, insulin, whatever, sign it in as he was doing it, and then cancel it and go, oops, I made a mistake. But then he'd actually still take the medications and still inject them into them,
thinking it would never show up in the system.
Well, it does show up, but see, the thing is in the investigation, they could go in and they could actually look and see who did what, but it never showed that he took the medications. It just showed that he had canceled.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying is he's probably thinking, I canceled it, so it probably won't even show up.
No, because I think he knew it did, but I think for him, what he knew is that there would never be proof that he actually took the medication because he'd cancel them, right? So he ends up becoming this suspect, and people are kind of like, hey, listen, like something is not correct. Well, during this investigation, St. Luke's realizes they don't want this to get out to the public, that all these patients have died and they might have been at the hands of
because
one
they'll
of their
get
nurses.
sued and lose tons of fucking money.
So they basically pull Charles off to the side and offer him a deal. They basically say, listen, we won't press charges against you. However, you need to resign, and we will in return give you a neutral recommendation so you can get a job elsewhere. Or your other option is we press charges and you get fired. What do you want to do?
I wonder what he picked.
So he ends up taking the deal, and he leaves St. Luke's in June of 2002. Now, in September of 2002, Charles starts working at Somerset Medical Center in the critical care unit. And during that time, he actually killed at least 8 patients there. Now, he would use digoxin, insulin, and epinephrines to kill those patients. Now, in mid-2003, he did attempt to kill another patient, but was unsuccessful. Then on June 18th, 2003, Charles tries to kill another patient, but again is unsuccessful. And then Somerset Medical at this point has some thoughts that Charles was doing something wrong. Charles must be doing something wrong. Because, again, the computers were showing that Charles was accessing patients that were not his. They were looking and going, why is he looking up information about patients that are not his patients? It also showed that he had made some strange medication requests for patients that were not his. So Somerset, actually, the hospital, Somerset Hospital. Sorry, Somerset, it cracks me up because Jay and I listen to books. And one of the books we listen to is J.D. Robb. And in the J.D. Robb books, the butler's name is Somerset. So the whole time that I was doing this shit, I kept thinking of it as a person, not the hospital. But anyways, so Somerset Hospital actually notifies the New Jersey Poison Information and Education System in 2003 that an employee might be killing patients with overdoses of medication. Like a person from Somerset Hospital had notified them. However, the authorities were not actually notified until October. So again, this was in July when they contacted the New Jersey Poison Information to be like, hey, here's what's going on. We're kind of concerned. And the guy's like, okay, so call the fucking authorities. Like, we need to figure this shit out. And it got to a point even where the guy that this was reported to actually called them and said, if somebody is killing people in your hospital and you have not reported it yet, that's a big fucking problem. Like, you need to report it. So they do finally report it in October. Within the time frame from them telling New Jersey Poison Information and Education about their suspicions and the time that they actually called authorities, Charles killed 5 more patients. Now, in October of 2003, Charles ends up killing his very last patient. That patient died of low blood sugar, which was caused by an insulin overdose. Now, police were notified and Charles was fired on October 31st, 2003. Now, his reason for being fired was not because they thought he killed a patient.
No, hell no, because they're going to cover it up.
It was not because they had suspicions that he had killed a patient. It was because, sir, we were looking over your application and we have reason to believe that you were lying on your application. So therefore, we don't trust you anymore. Goodbye. What? So during this time, there is another nurse that works a lot with Charles. Her name is Nurse Amy, and she actually ends up contacting the police. And she tells them that she has suspicions about the deaths and that Charles may have had something to do with it. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that Amy originally did not think he had anything to do with it. She was flabbergasted because in the documentary, they talked to her and she's like, he was literally the best nurse I've ever fucking seen. Like, he knew medication that nobody else knew. He knew what it should do, what it can do. He was super fucking smart. And so when they first came out with like, hey, we think this could be an issue, she's like, when the police were questioning, she's like, absolutely not Charles. Like, there's no fucking way. Then she starts to kind of piece things together. She starts to think about things that happen. And she was like, wait, hold on. She knew that Charles had been tricking the system. Like, she knew that he was doing the cancellation to have the door pop open for medications. Like, she started to realize that, wait, some of this shit kind of makes sense. And so she goes and talks to the police and she's like, I guess, there is a chance. There is a chance that Charles could have done this, but I just don't understand why he would do it. Like, he's a good guy, like whatever. So the police end up keeping him under surveillance, and they actually do wire. Like, she goes and meets with him wearing a wire. Like, she agrees to go meet with him wearing a wire. On December 12th, 2003, Charles is arrested while sitting at a restaurant, and he is charged with 1 count of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. And then 2 days after being arrested, he actually admits to 2 more murders at Somerset. He then eventually confesses to murdering up to 40 patients during his nursing career. Now, I do want to say, though, what's really crazy is when he first got arrested, he was not admitting to anything. And then what made him really start to admit stuff was they actually brought the nurse Amy in because she was his friend. And she even said there was a point where she was like, okay, so if he did this, fine. So she said she went in and they asked her, like, you need to talk to him, see if he'll open up to you. So she basically says, like, I don't know what I don't know what happened. I don't know why you did it. She's like, but, I'm your friend and I don't want you to lie about it, blah, blah, blah. They go through all these things and she tells him, like, I need you in my life still. And he was like, okay, well, what do you need me to do? And she said, I just really need you to tell the truth. And so he does. He starts talking about how he killed all these people. He tells her that he was doing it to stop their suffering. So for a very long time, she was like, I couldn't really hate him because I felt like he was doing it to end people's suffering.
Until you realize that some of the people he killed were on the mend and getting ready to be let out.
Right. But to her, what he's telling her is, he tells her, like he said, I've been in nursing for so long and I've watched these hospitals treat these patients terribly as they're dying. I was just trying to, again, an angel of death, right? So this is kind of why he was nicknamed the angel of death, because it was like, that's what he wanted people to think, is he was here to end their suffering, right? So in April of 2004, Charles actually pleads guilty to killing 13 patients, attempting to kill 2 patients, and a plea deal is actually brought to him. They take the death penalty off of the table if he agrees to cooperate. And he agreed. Then in May of 2004, he actually pleads guilty to killing 3 more patients. And then in November of 2004, he pleads guilty to 6 more deaths and 3 more attempted murders. Charles is actually sentenced to 18 consecutive life sentences on March 2nd, 2006. He will not be eligible for parole until 2403. I don't even know how to say that.
2403.
Yeah, 2403. Okay. He will never get out of prison, ever. Now, Charles is currently being held at the New Jersey State Prison in Trenton, New Jersey. Would you like to hear the shots?
Actually, before you go to the shots, I think the people who covered this shit up
and
moved him on need to be in the jail cell right next to his ass.
These hospitals
fucking ridiculous.
Are so fucking grotesque. I mean, we all know that there's medical malpractice and it always gets covered up unless for some reason somebody can blow the lid wide open. But what blows my mind is, to this day, none of the fucking hospitals have been held responsible.
No, and
knowing that they covered this shit up.
And they won't, because as soon as they do, they're going to have to pay out to the victims.
It just should not be like that at all. So do you
Anyways,
want to hear? Okay, shots.
Let's get into the shots.
All right, so Charles admits that he would often fantasize about stealing drugs from the medical center that he worked at to kill himself. So when he would work, he would go through these bouts where he would literally take these medications and consider using them on himself. Interesting, because you had said, why doesn't he do that? He also claims that the death of his mother was very devastating, and that he was super upset with the hospital that had taken her in, because when his mother died, they did not immediately tell him or his family that she had died. They just kind of let him know that she had been in a car accident, right? And again, remember, he was 17 when this happened. And then on top of it, they actually cremated her body without allowing the family to get her remains back to decide what to do with her.
Yeah,
that's pretty fucked. Like it was an accident, I'm sure. I'm sure that they just decided, they thought she was in a cremation list of people or whatever, but it doesn't matter. Right then and there, again, those are the kind of things that the hospital should have been held responsible for, that fucking error.
Yep.
Now, Charles was also elected president of his nursing class while he was in school, because he was that fucking good. Like, he was that good. There was a national nurse shortage for a little while, which is actually why Charles never had a problem finding a job, like once he would leave. Even though he had a less than stellar record, they never really focused on it because they just needed nurses.
Yep. Just butt in the seat.
Yeah. 7 coworkers of Charles from St. Luke's. So St. Luke's was one of the first, one of the hospitals he worked at. They actually had alerted the Lehigh County District Attorney that they were suspicious of Charles and felt that he had killed patients using drugs. 9 months after this happened, they dropped the case and nothing ever happened to him. So again, when he worked at St. Luke's, which was before he worked at Somerset, the district attorney of New Jersey was fucking told about this. 7 coworkers. They looked into it for 9 months or so, they say, and then closed the case and nothing was ever done.
Yeah, we'll see how hard they looked into it.
Exactly. Now, when Charles was in court for his sentencing, he became very upset with the judge that was giving him his sentence. And he kept repeating, Your Honor, you need to step down. Your Honor, you need to step down, over and over and over for 30 minutes. The judge...
I'd have thrown the gavel at him.
Oh, you're going to like this. The judge got pissed. And he was like, fuck this guy. So he gagged him with a cloth and duct tape. They fucking gagged him. Literally gagged him and put duct tape over his mouth. To which Charles kept trying to say, Your Honor, you need to step down, through the gag. And actually ended up having 6 more life sentences added onto his sentence because of this. Now, the film, the movie, The Good Nurse, which is that's not the documentary. That's the movie, The Good Nurse. It actually is based on Charles Cullen. I did watch The Good Nurse. It's on Netflix. I encourage you to watch it. It's not by the book of everything that happened, but it does a pretty good job of explaining literally what his life was. It doesn't really talk much about his his earlier years. It does talk a little bit about his divorce. One of the big things that was very different was in the movie, Charles is really good friends with the nurse Amy to the point where he's like gets to know her daughter and he goes to her house and all this stuff. That didn't happen. That didn't happen because in the documentary, Nurse Amy said that she had to sit down with her daughter and say, Mommy works with somebody who might be hurting other people. So this little girl didn't actually know who Charles was. Now, Charles also claims, so here we go. His claim as the reason why he did this is that he would overdose and kill the patients because he was trying to save them from going into cardiac or respiratory arrest. Because again, he worked a lot of the times in the cardiac units. Now, he also claimed that this was done to end their suffering and prevent hospital staff from dehumanizing them, which I understand because of what happened to his mother, because his mother was cremated without their knowledge, without their approval. So I get that. The problem with this motive is that, like you had said, not all of his victims were terminal patients. Many, like majority of the patients, were described as being on the mend and getting close to being discharged. So if he really was doing this to stop their suffering, they would have been terminal.
Right.
And they would have been basically in the hospital till they died. So Amy, the nurse, after she found out how many patients he had killed, and when she found out what these patients were in the hospital for, that's when she finally said it clicked to her that he was not an angel of death, that he was a serial killer, that he was murdering for his own selfish pleasure more so than anything else. And so again, some of the drugs he chose to use would not have been a humane way to kill somebody anyways.
No, and I thought the documentary did a decent job. The only thing I didn't like about the documentary is they kept saying mass murderer.
Oh my God.
Oh my
God.
Killer.
We were watching it and it was like, Charles Cullen, mass murderer. And every time I'd go, serial killer. And Jay kept going, you're just going to say that every time I go, yeah, because it's not the same thing. A mass murderer is somebody who kills a bunch of people at one time. A bunch of people at one time. I'll say it one more time. A bunch of people at one time. That is a mass murderer. Somebody who goes and kills a bunch of people one right after another, that is a spree killer. Somebody who kills multiple people with cooling off periods is a fucking serial killer. It doesn't matter how you kill them. It doesn't matter what your method is when you are killing multiple people and you have times where you're not killing. You're a serial killer. And I kept saying to Jay, I was like, it bothers me because they use these fucking terms they intertwine them. It's like they don't mean the same thing. And so when people watch this documentary, they're going to walk away from this going, oh, Charles Cullen was a mass murderer. No, the fuck he wasn't. He was a fucking serial killer. And that's a very different species of person. Like, it bothered me so much. I was so annoyed by that. But you are right. The documentary, so I watched the movie first and then I watched the documentary after. They're both on Netflix. And I'll be honest with you, it was Netflix, right? That's what I was watching on?
Yeah, it was Netflix.
Or was it Peacock?
No.
Yeah, see, now I don't know. It could be Peacock. Okay, I'm going to be honest. It could be Peacock or Netflix.
We're wrong. Check the Peacock.
Check Peacocks or Netflix. But The documentary was really good because it actually talks to the nurse Amy, the one who actually helped them capture Charles Cullen. And so you get a lot of really good information from that. And
I think some of the video is like real video of like when they're interviewing him
yes,
at the
you
police
can hear his
station and
voice.
stuff. And
yeah, there's a part where
Yeah.
and you can hear him talk. Like they have snippets of him talking and stuff throughout. So it was really, again, this is not one of those like really gruesome. There's not a lot of gruesome details. At the end of the day, he's still a fucking serial killer. But it's more of a lighthearted one because it's kind of like he kind of sucks. Like everybody thinks he sucks and he is a sucky person, but he wasn't like brutally disgusting about
Yeah.
it. My final thing that I will say about Charles Cullen is by looking at his past and looking at how he was growing up, somebody should have intervened with him a long time ago. He tried to commit
with the
suicide.
attempted suicides, like he
the
needed
the amount of
professional help.
times that he committed suicide and was in psychiatric facilities, first of all, he should have never been able to be a nurse, like ever.
No, absolutely not.
And again, communication between hospitals should have very much been there, which I actually believe, I forgot to write this down, but I'm pretty sure that due to this Charles Cullen, they actually passed like laws and stuff now of if people are let go of their jobs because of malpractice or whatever, it actually can be, it's got to stay on their records so that they can't be rehired in other places. Because that's the other thing is how many fucking hospitals? I think he worked for like 9 or 12 hospitals. And so it's one of those things where it's like, he should have never been allowed to work for that many hospitals either because he had been fired. He had been treated as a murder suspect. He had been let go for things that they thought that he had accidentally or purposefully killed people. That should have been a big mark, and he should have lost his nursing license, but nobody reported it. Nobody wanted to talk about it because everyone wants to fucking protect their goddamn selves. So the hospitals, in my opinion, are just as guilty of killing these patients as Charles Cullen is. They absolutely could have done something.
They need to be held
I
responsible
totally agree.
as well.
And I know they never will. Like I said, to this day, none of the hospitals have ever been accountable for their part. And their part, by the way, is keeping a person on staff when there are rumors and things that lead to the idea that he might be killing somebody. Maybe on accident, doesn't matter. He should have been put on what do you call it? Not medical leave, but he should have been put on leave while they did the investigation at the fucking bare minimum.
Well, and the only thing I have to say before we get into our normal closing arguments, our closing statements is Timothy McVeigh, mass murderer. Charles Cullen, serial killer.
Exactly.
That is the difference.
Please know
people.
the difference. Please know the difference.
And
it's
with
important.
that, tell your friends about the difference. If they want to know the difference, tell them to listen to us.
Tell them
follow
to come
us,
hang.
check out the podcast. Appreciate everybody out there listening to this. We're going to keep doing it. We love it. We're having fun. So
we do.
Yeah, share us, follow us. And yeah, I think with that.
I think he wrapped it all up enough for me to be able to say, this is the part where I'm going to say goodbye.
And I'll hit you with the bye-bye.
Remember to lock your doors and bar your windows. Until next time.